Hello, everyone, and welcome to this class, Intro to the Enneagram. I'm Pastor Janet Wilson from Chapel Hill United Methodist Church, and I welcome you to this about 20-minute session in which we're just going to be exploring a personality typing and spiritual growth tool called the Enneagram. It's one that I've been learning and using personally for almost 20 years. Really believe is a powerful tool, and just want you to learn a little bit more about it, that you might be able to decide whether it's something that appeals to you or not. And then we'll talk about some other ways we might explore it in the future. So I'm going to be primarily teaching through some slides today, through some visuals. So I'll see you now, and I'll see you, and then I'll be in a little box, and then I'll see you at the end. So give me a moment here as we just get to the slides, and we'll begin. All right, intro to the Enneagram. And the Enneagram itself is this funny looking circle on the side, and Ennea means 9. Gram is diagram, so it literally is the diagram of 9. So there's no hidden meaning in the symbol. It just is a diagram of 9. You'll see the numbers 1 through 9 around the outside of the circle, and Ennea types are generally expressed by number, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. So what is the Enneagram? It is, as I've said, a tool for personality typing, personality, kind of how we interact with the world, both good and bad, essential and coping skills that we've learned. Myers-Briggs is another personality typing tool. The DISC profile is the same. And so you may have encountered one of these before, but the Enneagram, more than any of them, both has some very ancient spiritual roots and has been used spiritually for a long time, and is designed to help you move closer to the core of who you are. Kind of born this perfect little being that God has created, and our personalities are a blend of nature and nurture, and of things that we do right and we're rewarded for, and things that we do wrong in our family structure and we're punished for. And those can look very different depending on family units and circumstance. And so we start layering on these ways that we move through the world, and lots of other things can cause that. But somewhere down, there is still this very essential core of ourselves. And so the Enneagram, who God created us to be, so the Enneagram is a tool to help move closer and closer to that core. There's great wisdom in the Enneagram for people who want to get out of their own way and move closer to the person they were created to be. And it is definitely a tool used as a spiritual practice. It's a lot more difficult for us to make changes than it is for us to offer ourselves to God and give God room to make those changes in us. What isn't the Enneagram? It isn't the end all and be all of anything. It's not more than it is. It's just a tool for understanding primarily yourself. It can be a very powerful tool to help understand other people and the differences between you. But it's not a people labeling system where you get to put everybody in a box and that's how you treat them. It really is made to understand yourself. And it will appeal to some people, it won't to others. I have some friends who just don't particularly like it, and that is perfectly okay. It has to be something that suits you and kind of fits you in the way you learn and grow. It is a tool that really looks at body, mind, and spirit, kind of an integrated approach to becoming whole in God. So we'll use some of those terms as we go through this. And we know these things are just deeply interconnected, that our thoughts and our emotions and our body and our spirit all kind of move together in the world. We along with them. And so we'll see that as we go. And again, here is the basic Enneagram symbol, numbers 1 through 9, generally placed in that order around the symbol, as you might imagine. These lines have some meaning, but you can make this diagram with lines every which way. And often we'll see that there are layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of kind of learning and understanding in this. So we'll start simply with numbers 1 through 9. You'll see as we go that sometimes there are labels, nouns attached to these numbers, just to help us gain an understanding. But numbers are used because they're neutral. A 1 is a 1. That's all there is to it. Numbers are just descriptive. There's no rank ordering in this. All types are equal in importance and their place in the world. And truthfully, we have some of all of these parts in us. But there are just some we exercise more than others, and there is one that really motivates much of how we behave in the world. This is one of the underlying principles, I believe, of the Enneagram, that the best part of you is the worst part of you. And I am an Ennea type 1, and so I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to describing type 1. I'll pick on myself today in this, but there are definitely things that are just very big advantages and that have helped me move in the world. And just the flip side of that coin can also be a really difficult part of myself, both for me and for others. So we'll come back to this, but often this is true. The best part of you is the worst part of you. And that's also one of the ways you'll start to identify your type. So I'd like you, as we begin, just take a piece of paper, it can be a scrap paper, and just write down the numbers 1 through 9, kind of in a line down the page. And as I do what are going to be very brief descriptions of each type, I'm going to ask you just to put a plus by things that you hear in that type that you think, yeah, that sounds like me, and maybe a negative or a 0 by the things that don't sound like you in each type. And that's one of the ways that you'll start, just even in this 20 minutes, to identify your own type. There's some things it's just really easy to weed out. A lot of the best parts will sound like parts of you. That's the way we are. But it's going to be the worst parts that you hear and go, oh, that's awful, and that's me. They just tend to really identify themselves in that way. So probably by the end of today, you'll have half of the types just weeded out, and then we'll talk about other ways that you move forward to discover your type. This is another version of the Enneagram. You'll see this very bold line that is bisecting or trisecting, I guess, the diagram. And so one of the ways that the types are grouped is in these 3 groupings. 1s, 9s, and 8s are the body or the gut. Triad, 2s, 3s, and 4s are the heart or the feeling. Triad, and 5s, 6s, and 7s are in the head or the thinking triad. So when you, a couple things, when you think about how you relate with the world, does one of those call more strongly? So you might put a plus by the 2, 3, and 4 if you feel like you're a heart type. And one of the interesting ways to identify this is when you think about how you receive really difficult news, kind of painful news. Where does it hurt? I am a one, I'm in the body or the gut triad, and it literally feels like a kick in the stomach. That's very strongly. And so that was one of the identifiers for me for heart types. It's going to be a heartache, just a broken hearted um, time, even when it might not quite be a heart issue. And for the head types, it'll be a headache. My husband Mark gets a 5, and if he has a bad day, this is all where it is. So one way of grouping the 9 Enneatypes, and one way to, again, kind of take a look at where you might be in them. So we're going to go through the 9 types. Often in this, you kind of start at the beginning of a triad and move through them. So we're going to start with 8, remembering 8, 9s, and 1s are the gut or the body triad, and 8s are the challengers or the advocates. And there are probably 10 descriptors I've seen in different books and different teachings. Every teacher has kind of their own style for types, and so I just chose a couple of them. But don't let this particular name lock you into something. It's just one of many descriptors. 8s tend to be self-confident and decisive, and willful and confrontational. There are a few types that are described as aggressive, and 8s are one of them. Just kind of very out in the world and after things. So that is the 8. That's, I think, the level I'm going to talk about most of the types except for mine. 9s are the peacemakers, the mediators, very mellow folk to hang around with in general. They're receptive, reassuring, agreeable, but they're also a bit passive and complacent about things. They can disengage a bit. And now we come to the 1s. 1s are called sometimes the reformers or the perfectionist, principled and purposeful, but also perfectionistic and self-controlled. So I'll pick on myself here. I am a type 1. I was raised by, my mom was also a type 1. And I love the word reformer. Don't so much love the word perfectionist. And there's a lot in that has helped me make my way in the world. I can walk into a situation, I can take in some data, I can look at a room and kind of see what is disordered, maybe what can be improved, according, of course, to my standards and my knowing in the world, and willing to take action to make that happen. And that can be extremely valuable in a workplace, a home, in a situation, as it suits. But there's also a part of that always creates this inner tension within me where it's hard for me to just look at something and accept it as is without a little bit of inner work, a little bit of surrender to God. And I can also become way too perfectionistic and self-controlled, both with others and with situations, and certainly with myself. 1s are their own harshest critic. We have this little inner voice and a dialogue we're continually having with that inner critic. So it can get pretty layered, but again, it's something that has given me a way to just recognize that in myself as it's arising. Yesterday in quarantine, I spent the day fixing broken things. Might have been some of this in there, but it was a way to use that in a positive, constructive way rather than sniping at Mark or worrying about things that weren't mine to worry about or fix. So a little bit more detail on how that works. And acceptance is a very deep spiritual practice for me in that. So that's one of the understandings that you gain as you learn about your own Enneatype. How do I recognize it? How do I surrender it? What are some spiritual practices that I can use to give this to God? So now we move into the heart triad, 2s and 3s and 4s. 2s are the helper. That might be another couple words for them, but helper is super, super descriptive. Generous and demonstrative, but people pleasing and a bit prideful about things. I like to help, but I want to be recognized for helping. 3s are the achiever. I've heard it said that we're a 3 society in many ways. Because 3s are adaptable and excelling. Achieving, again, is a really good word. And they're driven and image conscious. And when you think of much of American advertising, it's 3 kind of advertising. It's kind of interesting right now. We're seeing a lot of heart advertising being more at the heart and loving each other than achieving. But this is very typically where things are, and 3s are really successful in most of corporate culture and a lot of situations. 4s are the individualist. The romantic is another noun that I've seen associated with 4s. They're expressive and dramatic, self-absorbed, a bit temperamental. Lots of artists and poets and musicians in this particular Enneatype. And it's the least common of the Enneatypes, which works if you want to be an individualist, which is pretty interesting. And now we're just going to move into the head triad, the 5s, 6s, and 7s, who identify far more with thinking than they do with feeling and doing, and feel things in their head. 5 is the investigator, the researcher, perceptive and innovative, but a bit secret and isolated. And this is my husband, Mark. So you have a 1 and a 5 living together. And you can see, I think, just even in these brief descriptions, we are not the same. We definitely approach life with different viewpoints. And so we both learned a lot about our own Enneatypes, and this has given us kind of a neutral language to talk about things. I can talk about my 1 behavior without making it quite so personal, and Mark can do the same. 6 is the loyalist, engaging and responsible, anxious and suspicious, often more of a follower than a leader. Thought to have more 6s in the world than any other type. So not all of us are born to lead and be in front or even to withdraw. 6s are kind of the pack, if you would, that helps make things happen. And we need that in the world. And last but not least is type 7. And 7s are the enthusiasts. They're the Labrador Retriever of the types. Spontaneous and versatile, acquisitive and scattered are 7s. They like new things. They like to go after them. They may buy a whole set of equipment to take up a new hobby and then leave it behind in a month or so. But often very fun folks to be around when they're in that mode to be with. So again, as you can see in every one of those, there were a couple words that were really positive and sounded like, well, I'd like to be that. And then a couple words that not so much. So the best part of you is the worst part of you. And we wrangle with that in Enneagram work. So we learn it for ourselves, and we learn it as a tool to be able to transform ourselves, that we might be closer to who God created us to be. But it also is really useful for understanding others, partly just understanding difference. I think that's why personality types are used in business and workplace settings often, because we hit on the edges of other people. I like this quote. I love a lot of people, understand none of them. So the goal of this is to understand others better as well. You don't want to label people. Ideally, you're learning this along with someone. My college age young adults brought this into my family about 15 years ago, and it's been a great tool for our family to learn. And so about each other and about ourselves, and be able to talk about that we have no common types in our family structure. Um, so it can be effectively used. It certainly can be used in the workplace and is being done more so in marriages and families all over. But it starts with understanding yourself and then inviting others to learn as well. Next steps in this. So again, this is just a very brief intro to the Enneagram, and I'd love to do some more teaching about this over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever we have where life's a little bit slowed down, and this mechanism or some kind of Zoom seminar, webinar, I think will work really well for this. So just contact me, put a comment in the comments below, send me an email. If you have that message, put a message on the Facebook page if that's where you're watching this, and just let me know that you'd like to be included in any future learning, and I'll make sure that you are. And you can explore the Enneagram online. There is a hot ton of it on the web, on Instagram, on Twitter, just about anywhere you look. A couple sources that I particularly like are the EnneagramInstitute.com and SuzanneStabile.com. These are two of the primary teachers of the Enneagram in the United States. Both have really solid, trustworthy information and a lot of very current things. And I will just remark, Suzanne Stabile has a podcast called The Enneagram Journey that I just love listening to, and so she'll interview or have a kind of a prolonged conversation with someone who's a 1 or a 3 or a 5, and just go back and forth with lots of questions. And so that's been a great tool for me, both to understand myself better and to understand others and kind of real life here, how the types, being a type 5, feels in folks and how that plays out. And then she has a lot of couples of different type combinations. So those are fascinating conversations. So that is where we are today. I'm going to stop sharing. But thank you again for joining me. I hope this has been helpful. Again, reach out in the comments or in a message if you would like to be included in teaching in the future. I hope this gives you some footing, some understanding of this powerful tool. And on this day, may you be safe, may you be well, and may you notice God's blessings.